Welcome to Gone in the Night, a conversation with Alan and Brian Brown. I'm Miranda U. Daly. I'm a reference librarian with Springfield-Greene County Library District, and I'm here with co-authors Brian and Alan Brown, who wrote the book Gone in the Night, the Springfield Three. So thank you guys for being here to talk with us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Appreciate your time. All right, so everybody listening in, feel free to submit questions on the Q&A box. You can find that usually at the bottom of your screen, or chat if you prefer that, either way. So let's get started. All right, Alan and Brian. So what do you think makes the Ozarks a good setting for a crime story?
Ooh, I'll start. A lot of things. The Ozarks is, a really unique setting because it is. I always think of the Ozarks as being kind of having a lot of places where things can hide. It's rural, but there's a lot of big city stuff. You've got Springfield, you've got Branson, where there's a lot of activity. There's a lot of different differences in the geography of the area. A lot of good, hardworking people in the area. A lot of loyal people, and it's kind of an overlooked place, I think. Certainly not by people who live here and there, but by people on the coast. On the East Coast and the West Coast, this is flyover country, but it's an area that means a lot to the people who live here. So, any more to add to that?
Well, I just add, it's a very mysterious place. It's a beautiful area. I love the Ozarks, and a lot of our books, our recent books, have the Ozarks as a background, and it's a place where, well, when I say it's a mystical type of place almost. It's so beautiful, so naturally beautiful, yet quiet. It's the type of place that people can imagine being there and things happening in the Ozarks that are unique, different.
Yeah, in Lake Honor, I'll add to that in that we talked a lot about the backdrop of the Ozarks, and we certainly did in Gone in the Night too. But in Lake Honor, we talked about it being a place that's neither north nor south. It's not east or west. It's not exactly urban or rural. I mean, it's a lot of different things, and so I think to that degree, it's mysterious.
Yeah, agreed. I like that answer. So it's obvious that you guys did a lot of research for this book. What kinds of resources did you use, and did you conduct any interviews?
Yeah, with the research and Alan, Dad got a jump on that over me, but a lot of old news leader stories, a lot of old reports, and things from KY3 and all the sources you would expect. But then also there's kind of a cottage industry out there of people who have been investigating this stuff themselves and have their own blog posts and own Facebook chat rooms and stuff like that.
Yeah, we read an awful lot of blogs, that's for sure. And, the police reports, read some police reports. We did not conduct any interviews. We thought about that a lot. The issue that we had was, one, coronavirus was just starting. We started the book actually when we were in St. Louis, when the office was closed. We couldn't work. I don't know what happened. Oh, there he goes. Couldn't work. So we spent a lot of time writing and researching the book. We could have conducted phone interviews. We chose not to, going based on the facts and the police reports and other media that we use to gather the information. But our intent all along was to write a fictional story. It was never supposed to be a factual story or based on, you know, the actual facts. The first 3 chapters of the book, though, detail all the facts of what happened that night, what the evidence was afterwards, and the prime suspects, at least initially in the investigation. From there, we used a fictional character, a fictional detective that we've used in several other of our books to do an investigation. And through him, we were able to speculate on things that might have occurred. We went down a lot of rabbit holes with our fictional private detective, just like the police went down a lot of rabbit holes in the initial investigation. There were so many clues that were given to police, and you know, we looked at most of the clues that we could find record of. Of course, the police held things back from the public that we weren't able to get information on. So I'm sure there's things that they know that we didn't know, but yeah,
Right.
that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and I'll add briefly to that. Yeah, we were, the book we had written before together was Lake Honor, and that was a Booger McLean book as well. That was actually the second, and Gone in the Night was the third. So it was always our intention to write, you know, this as a Booger McLean investigation. If you can imagine writing a series of fictional novels about a detective from the Ozarks who spends his time trying to solve unsolved cases, it's easier to understand why he had to investigate the Springfield Three, you know, the 3 missing women, because that's sort of the quintessential Ozarks case. And so it just made a lot of sense for us to do that. But we wanted to make sure that the facts of the case were the facts of the case, the things that people knew, and then our narrative was really about that fictional investigation.
Okay, yeah, that really, you know, my initial question reading the book was, why is this not a true crime account? But the context being that you're writing a detective series.
Right.
Makes total sense. So are the other books in the series based on actual crimes in the Ozarks?
Well, yeah, they are for the most part. Lake Honor is based on a crime that took place in 1973 on the campus of what was then called School of the Ozarks, down just outside of Branson. I was actually a student there at the time and was present when the bodies were dragged out of the lake, out of Lake Honor. And I wrote a story about it, I would say about a year later or so. It was published in the Springfield newspaper, not the Springfield newspaper, I'm sorry, the St. Joseph newspaper. And that was based strictly on, that story was strictly about the facts of the case and what happened the night before, what happened after the bodies were found in the investigation. That was our first time we went with Booger McLean. Booger McLean is actually, oh, I'm sorry.
Well, no. Because you did Children of the Carnival first. Right.
Children of the Carnival. Yeah, going back, I guess Children of the Carnival was the first time I used the name Booger McLean. And he was a fictional detective in that book too, which was also loosely based on a true story. So yeah, we take true stories, or true crimes, I should say. We look for crimes that have not been solved. We look for crimes that are older, that had a lot of publicity. We look for crimes in the Ozarks specifically. However, the last book, the newest book that's out, called On the Dark Edge of Heaven, is based on a crime that took place in Hannibal, Missouri.
Okay,
So we did go outside the Ozarks for that. But
not too
yeah,
often.
they're all fictional stories based on true crimes with the speculative narrative.
Yeah, I'll say this just to give, you know, to round out the context a little bit. Children of the Carnival, you know, as he mentioned, was pretty loosely based on, you know, there were some events of a you know, a child being abducted, you know, in Southeast Missouri. But there were a lot of, that one was pretty heavily fictionalized, in that there were a lot of supernatural elements to that story. And then Lake Honor, you know, was based on real events, but we changed all the names in Lake Honor, you know, to protect the people involved. And you know, because it was really hard to research for that book, you know, everything was based on Dad's memory of events. And we were only able to actually find the old article that he wrote after the book had just come out. You know, so it was heavily fictionalized, but you know, based on a true story. And it was coming out of that, that we felt like, with the three missing women, that was such a big case, such a well-known case, that people would be furious if we changed the names. You know, and so we felt like, you know, that case is such a piece of the furniture, so to speak, in Springfield, that we had to be true to it, and you know, let people you know about the real case, and then fictionalize around that and tell our story around the actual facts of the case.
Cool. So does Booger McLean happen to be emulated from a real life person, or is he completely fictionalized?
Absolutely, he is. When I first investigated the case of the two boys that drowned on the Lake Honor and School of the Ozarks, when I first did the article back in 1973, I met a character that was very much like Booger McLean. He was an investigator from Kansas City that the family had hired to come down, and one of the families had hired to come down and investigate the case because they were upset that the police just pretty much let it drop. And that character, I met him in a coffee shop in Springfield. I can't remember what it was. It's way back in 74, like I said. But he drank just tons of coffee. He smoked this awful Skokie cigar that smelled like, you know, he wore a big cowboy hat, a white Stetson cowboy hat. He had these boots that were rattlesnake skin boots. And he drove, you know, in our fictional account, he drives a old 69 Corvette. This was actually, it wasn't a Corvette, I remember, but it was candy apple red. I mean, people had to see him coming from a mile away, but he was such a character, a loud person, just like Booger is, and a great guy, genuinely a great guy.
That's great. I love knowing that that Booger's like kind of a real person. So kind of to switch topics a little bit, we've got a question in the Q&A box here. Did you live in Springfield when you heard about the report of the women being missing?
I did. I graduated from Parkview High School in 1993. So I was living there. I was a junior when it happened. And a lot of the details that I have in chapter 2 of this book are you know, more or less true to my memory. I had gone up to St. Louis, you know, right after the school year had ended, and you know, began hearing things, but it wasn't, you know, this was an age before social media, so I really didn't know what was going on. And I came back to Springfield in late June, I think, of 92 of that year, and couldn't believe how things had transformed, and how the, you know, the signs and the posters like we've got in the background were on every corner, and you know, you couldn't walk into a grocery store or a bank or anywhere without seeing their pictures, and they were on billboards, and you know, and it was you know, pretty remarkable to me. And of course, at the time, I thought, well, there's no way this can't get solved, you know, because there was so much attention on this case, and everybody was talking about it, and everybody had an opinion about it and what they had thought had happened. And you know, I would have never dreamed that 29 years later, it still wasn't solved. I would have never thought that.
Right, right. Another question, do either of you or both of you have your own theory about what happened, who did it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, you go first.
Well, I think if you read the book, you'll understand who we think is responsible. There was a lot of speculation when I read articles about the case and read the blogs. There was an awful lot of speculation that drugs were involved somehow. We actually did not find any evidence in what we looked through. We didn't find any evidence that any of the girls, either of the girls or the mother for that matter, were involved with drugs at all. So we kind of dismissed that theory, although there's a hook at the end of the book that when you read it, you'll see, you know, does open it up to some other idea of what may have occurred. But yeah, we pretty much pinpoint who we think is responsible.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, and I'll just add to that real quick. That's a moving target, at least for me, to some degree. I definitely, we did, you know, through Booger, give our best guess at what happened, and I mostly stand by that, you know, but I've changed my mind at times and thought, well, no, it could be more along these lines, or it still could be this. So you know, I feel like, you know, that is our opinion, but it is a moving target, in that, you know, it's really tricky. And it's been interesting hearing from the community too, you know, and that can't help but shape our opinions as well, because obviously there's a lot of strong opinions about what happened from different folks, and so that's been interesting to see come out of the woodwork.
It has. We've got a Facebook page dedicated to it that we've received an awful lot of tips, ideas of what may have occurred. A lot of speculation. Everybody's speculating about the case, obviously, but there have been some things that have made me think maybe there's an alternative answer to what happened to those women and who's responsible.
Yeah, I know that, you know, like you said, there's lots of theories going out there, lots of little details that people are focusing on, one or the other. We had one reader ahead of today's email me a question saying, I know many people who think that the ladies were buried in the PFI parking lot. Why was there not a hint of this in the novel? And I might expand on that. Like, how did you choose which details to include and which to not include?
Well, it was corroboration, I suppose. If we had several people, we read police reports and other newspaper articles that had several people that backed up that idea, then we put it in the book. If there was one or two speculations about, where the women were buried or what happened, we did not include that. We tried to stick with the most probable scenarios of what happened and what happened to the women.
I'll say this too. We've heard. I hadn't seen a lot in what I had researched about that prior to. I mean, we had seen a lot about them being buried in a parking lot, about them being buried at Cox or at Mercy, or you name the parking lot. So it was important to us to have that in the book. But PFI specifically, we just hadn't seen a lot about that, at the time that we were writing. And we've heard a lot of people, since the book has been published, say, the PFI, I think they're buried under the 3 horses at PFI. So if it would have been maybe that prevalent to us when we were researching, we might have mentioned it, but we don't. There's nothing that makes me think that that's probable at all. I think, because there had been a lot of publicity about them potentially being buried at the Cox South parking lot, that maybe others have, maybe that urban legend has emerged. I'm not sure, but we definitely wanted to have Cox South in there, and we just didn't think PFI was that big of a deal.
Well, quite frankly, we did dismiss Cox parking lot as being the burial spot, mainly because construction on that began considerable time after the women disappeared.
Gotcha. Makes sense. So we have another question in our Q&A box. It says, the tragedy of the 3 missing women is still very painfully fresh for many people in the Ozarks. Did you have any misgivings about putting a fictional spin on a true story?
For me, I think we've had different takes on this. I have, and I tried to talk about this in the book. I mean, there is some of this, this thread of should the book be fictional or not, that is in the book, and that's because of misgivings I had, and I think part of that is because of my journalism background. I was a business reporter at Springfield Business Journal for 6 years, and I had worked at Community Free Press for 2.5 years before that. So, that's kind of my background, and that, writing fiction is a little bit out of my comfort zone. So there's that part of me that wants to go and interview everybody and, do the true crime novel thing. But, like I said, from the beginning, this was always for us, it was always about Booger and, how do we forward this character that we've got and that we like, because we just like the idea of him investigating all these crimes and bringing attention to, a lot of different things too. And so in short, a true crime novel or, a true crime book just would have been a different book. And I hope that, that this book maybe spurs that. I mean, there's already been a couple of attempts, but I would love to see somebody put out a definitive nonfiction, account of what happened to this case. I hope somebody does, but that wasn't ever what we were going to do. I mean, it just wasn't.
Yeah. A commenter here says, wouldn't it be great that your book gets people talking and police get a tip that solves the crime? Which was definitely one of my questions. Like, do you think this is going to stir up some fresh eyes on this? And then secondarily, like, could you imagine yourself getting into like some trouble or danger like the characters in your book do when they investigate this crime?
No, well, I've never actually thought of that until now.
Now you're
Now
scaring
you're
us.
scaring me a little bit. But no, you know, our goal when we wrote this book, I know people say, well, your goal as a writer is going to be to sell a lot of books. Well, I got to tell you, I've written now 12 books, working on 13, and I've never made any of them when you account for the marketing costs of getting the advertising out there for the book and that sort of thing. So money's never been a goal. I love to write, and I think Brian would say the same thing, that he loves to write too. That's our motivation. But this story was extremely important to us from a standpoint of, we want the crime to be solved too. As much as just about anybody out there wants a crime to be solved. Our hope was that by publishing this book, that people would come forward, and they have, and given tips and given ideas that might help the police. Brian's been in contact with the detective in charge of the case in Springfield, and I know he's turned over several of those tips. So that's our goal. If we could have one thing occur from this book, it would be that the crime would be solved, whether it's as a result of the books and the tips that come in from it, or some other reason. We want closure to come to the families. We want closure to come to the people of Springfield.
Yeah, we have gotten things, things that people have said on our website, or messages that people have sent us through Facebook, from people in the community who think they know what has happened. And I've tried to turn over everything that I thought could possibly mean anything to the Springfield Police Department. So we have turned over tips, absolutely. We don't know, if how actionable some of that stuff is. We don't know what the police department knows and what they don't, and if there's necessarily anything new that we're bringing to the table. But certainly when we've heard stuff from people, we are sharing that with the police, and will continue to do so.
All right. Another reader question here. With reading all the blogs and writing the book, did you find yourself going down theory rabbit holes?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I think you'll see that in the book, because Booger refers to going down rabbit holes on a regular basis. He followed a lot of the same leads in the book that the police department followed initially in the investigation, and most led to dead ends. And that was part of the fun of writing the book, was the speculation. Something we couldn't have done had that been a nonfiction book. We were able to speculate on different things that could have occurred, what Booger's thought process was on how the crime took place, on who might have been responsible, where the bodies might have been buried. The van was a big clue, and he did quite a bit of speculating on that too.
Yeah.
We like to think we went down some of the same rabbit holes that the police did.
Yeah, and we tried to to capture that throughout the book, that feeling of, we wanted to take readers, on that journey with us. Like, what do you think happened, and what that's really like. And I think that, hopefully that helped move the book along and give it a good flow, because you get caught up in it, and you want to know yourself what happened. And so we did try to take people on that journey with us.
Nice. Another question here in Q&A. Have you had any interactions with the women surviving family members?
I reached out to Janice McCall and talked with her. It's been a couple months ago now. It was after the book came out, and it was just sort of a nagging thing for me. I believe that we wrote a good book. I believe that we did it ethically and responsibly, but I know that there are real people too connected to this. And so I reached out to her, and we had a great conversation, and she was very kind, and and told me that that she was a little surprised, to see this book out there, and she had read it and said she liked it, and we just had a really good conversation. I told her that that I wished I had reached out, before we had published it, and talked with her, and I meant that. But she couldn't have been kinder, and our hearts are with the families. I mean, that's just how it is.
Yeah, yeah. So back to your books. What is next for Booger McLean? Are we going to see some different Ozarks crime stories? There's also like this little cliffhanger at the end of the Springfield 3 book. Is that a continuing story, or are we going to be left hanging there?
Well, it is a continuing story. However, it's not the next project. The project that we're working on right now is also based in the Ozarks, but it's in the Arkansas Ozarks, the northern part of Arkansas. And it is not based on a true story. It is total fiction.
Yeah.
Which is a deviation from what we've done over the last several books. But it's a fun story. We're having a lot of we're really enjoying writing this book.
Yeah, it's called Shadow Valley, and it's about a trailer park in Pea Ridge, Arkansas, a completely fictional trailer park. And there's a lot of Branson involved in this one, and there will be some it's based in Northwest Arkansas primarily, though, but there's prostitutes, and there's drugs, and there's crime, and there's Booger and Rose, and they're in the middle of it all. So we are having fun with that one, and we're smack in the middle of it right now. So
that's cool. I'm a big fan of Rose.
Based on my wife, actually.
Oh, that's great. She's marvelous.
We think so far out of this is my third book, working with Dad on the series, and this is my favorite Booger and Rose book yet. So I really think there's a lot of fun interactions with them that people can look forward to.
That's great. So another question I have is, what is it like to write as a father and son team? And how is it different from writing on your own?
Oh, it's actually wonderful. We work well together. I like to say that I put the story together kind of like kind of like a picture in a coloring book where you've got the edges all put together, the frame of the picture, and then Brian comes in and colors everything in. So we work very, very well together. I'll write a chapter, give it to Brian. He'll color it in and add, whatever he wants to do. And I've got to say, to date, so far with the 3 books we've written, there hasn't been any arguments or disagreements on what either of us have done. It's just really, really flowed well for us.
Yeah, I think of it like this. He kind of puts the clay on the wheel, and I shape it, I think, and which has been a lot of fun for me, because I do get to add and take away and emphasize certain things. And I like I want the book to flow well, so I'm focused on a lot of intangible things to try to keep the story moving and that sort of thing. So I think it has worked well. I said this, I've got a couple of books that I've been writing on my own for years, and they never get done. And it's because I can't quite get out of my head with it. But if Dad's Dad's a taskmaster, he's go, and once he gets an idea, he's just got to run with it. And so it's been good for me, because I've really learned how to write a book through through this process, and it's become something that's not so mysterious or impossible anymore. The key, I think, is to just to stick with it, to do some every day, and to keep plugging away with it. And so I've had a goal for myself of, once we get going with it, I want to do a chapter a week, and usually Dad's doing more than that, and so I'm kind of catching up or falling behind or whatever. But that's something that's reasonable for me, that's a reasonable goal that I can achieve, and it has worked well. It really has.
Yeah, which is actually takes me to my next question, was what advice would you have for other local aspiring writers?
Well, just believe in yourself, one, and dedicate some. Stephen King once said, he gave a great piece of advice that I've listened to and paid attention to as much as I can, and that's: sit down every day, take an hour of your day, maybe a little bit longer, maybe a little bit less, but dedicate that portion of the day to writing, and just sit there and write. And the other piece of advice that he gave, which I definitely do, and I think Brian does too, is we think about that book on a regular basis. We'll take time, we call it quiet time, where we'll just sit there, lights out, just thinking about, well,
We're sitting in the dark.
I sit in the dark.
Yeah.
I'm always in the dark.
Okay.
You're not. And we just think about the book. And a lot of times where writers get into trouble is what I like to refer to as writer's block. You get to a point in the book where you just don't know the direction that you want to go, or you get stuck and just can't go on. But if you're writing every day, and if you're taking that time, that quiet time, to just think about your story, it helps an awful lot.
Yeah, I'll add this. You don't have to have all the answers. You can have a general idea of where you're going. It's like, if you want to go to to Los Angeles, but you don't have a map. Well, head west first, you know, and you can pick up ideas on the way. And once you get to Oklahoma City, then you can figure out, okay, well, I'll get on 40 and I'll go from there. You're never going to have all of the answers before you start. So, you know, start writing, start doing it, and you'll figure things out as you go. And I think also if you have someone, I had heard this from somebody, but if you have writer's block, start asking yourself questions. You know, ask what you want from the characters, what this character is about, what you want the end to look like. Ask yourself questions, and in those answers, you'll get, you can find a way forward.
You know, and one thing Brian said is so true, and I hadn't thought about that, but it's like a journey. It's like a trip that you're taking. You know the generally the final destination that you want to get to, but along the way, there's going to be things that you want to stop and enjoy a little bit. So you may deviate on that path if you, and that's what we do. We write chapter by chapter. We know the general idea of what the story is, an outline, I suppose, is what most writers would call it. We know the general direction that we're going in, but every chapter is a story in itself. So we'll concentrate on the first chapter. When we tell a good story in the first chapter, we'll decide on what direction we want to take in the second chapter. And a lot of times our books will deviate in directions that we never saw coming when we originally sat down and started to write.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, we've got one more question in the Q&A. Have you ever considered a mashup book with former prosecutor and author Nancy Allen?
Oh, no. You know, call us, Nancy, if you want. No, that's interesting. We hadn't thought of, no, that's interesting.
No.
Well, maybe we planted a seed.
There you go.
All right, well, I believe that's all we have for the evening. So thank you guys so much for joining us tonight, for taking your time to talk with us. I know a lot of readers in Springfield are reading your book and loving it.
Well, thank you, and thanks for the time.
Yeah, thank you very much. We appreciate it.